There was just so much.
You're listening to a Mamamia podcast.
Mamamia acknowledges the traditional owners of the land we have recorded this podcast on, the Gadigal people of the Eora Nation. We pay our respects to their elders, past and present, and extend that respect to all Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander cultures.
We need to use our microphones. Oh, okay. Are they on? Are they on now?
Hello.
Great. Oh, I see.
Very good shirt, darling.
We prefer hearing our voices loud.
Yeah.
We like hearing our voices loud. You don't get to look at the
because
sequence.
we're going deaf.
And you don't get to look at the view, but anyway, you can have a look at the view
Overhead.
afterwards. It can't compete with the view from your hotel room.
Can we talk about that view? I mean, that view is like, because I remember the first time I came to Australia and I really wanted to stay in that hotel. And they said, if you stay in that hotel,
So
you and
expensive.
Susanna have to share a single because it's so expensive. So
You can sleep in the car
you can
park.
literally sleep in the car park. And so we did this in New York first. We did a hotel called the Crosby, which is a beautiful hotel.
Nice, yeah.
And so we did this kind of press back to back and giving them a nice experience. So we just thought, okay, we can sneak it in the budget. But I slept in a much smaller room until we had to do the press.
It's a beautiful space.
It's amazing because you have seas, you have nature, you've got a balcony, so you've got air.
Yeah, no, we
You've got
wanted to.
bloody opera house right in your face.
The last time Trinny Woodall and I were alone in a studio to do an interview, she cried.
She said, what is it? What is it? You know, that sort of sensing. And I said, you know, Dad has died, darling. And she screamed like an animal. And the whole house heard it. And like the friends of mine who were in the house just remember that. They all remember that sort of animal scream.
Neither of us were expecting that because we'd only met about 20 minutes earlier. And at the time, I knew very little of Trinny's story. I remembered her from that TV show where she and her mate Susanna used to grab women on the street and sort of poke around at their boobs and their bum because they wanted to give them a fashion makeover. And that was all a bit of fun. Well, they probably wouldn't be allowed to do the poking anymore.
We're renowned for telling people what not to wear. Someone has got to tell these women what they really look like.
And it might as well be us.
But I hadn't yet caught up with the fact that Trinny had reinvented herself in her early 50s. Because who does that? Isn't that when kind of you wind down?
And 50s was about fully being the woman I want to be and feeling that I didn't worry what people think.
There's no winding down for Trinny. She started a beauty brand called Trinny London. She sold a heap of her designer clothes so that she could raise enough money to develop these product samples, makeup in little pots. And then she schlepped around boardrooms all over London trying to get investors, trying to explain to men why her beauty company would give women something that they didn't already have.
And I go, are you that audience? As a 50-year-old man? You know? Do you know that I might know that audience better than you?
So by the time we met, I want to say like 4 years ago, she was on a media tour of Australia trying to get more women here to buy her products. We fell in love in the studio that day. It really was love at first sight. We had instant friend chemistry. And we are both female founders of businesses that make things for women. I make content, Trinny makes beauty products. And there are a bunch of things that are very specific to our experience that I think bonded us immediately. And we've stayed close since that first interview. Sometimes we do things live on social media. Often we will DM and be in regular communication. But we've never sat down before and talked about the nitty-gritty. So when Trinny told me she was coming back to Australia for the first time since the pandemic, I invited her back into Mamamia. But not the studio this time. She has got a lot of fans. And she also gets a real charge out of being in front of a crowd. You might think that having an audience would make me not ask the really nosy personal questions, but yeah, you'd be wrong.
Is it public knowledge how much of your company you own?
No.
How much of your company do you own?
For Mamamia, I'm Mia Friedman, and you're listening to a very special live No Filter with Trinny. If you want to get the full experience of this interview, including seeing what Trinny and I are wearing, our body language, we actually own a ridiculous number of the same clothes, and you'll also get a glimpse of the Mamamia offices. You can choose to watch this conversation on video if you're a Mamamia subscriber, and you can become one right now. There is a link to the video version in the show notes. And also just a note that because we recorded this live, the audio isn't perfect, but it means that you truly get Trinny and I, no filter. I worry about you because you have 3 full-time jobs. You are a full-time content creator. You create more content than any influencer I know who that is their full-time job.
Yeah.
You are the CEO of Trinny London and you are also the face of your brand. And they are all not just full-time jobs, but extra full-time jobs.
Yeah.
And so when something happens like that, and I was thinking also when you had COVID, for example, and you've had COVID twice, I think.
Yeah.
And you have to go dark. Does that give you pause afterwards or during to think, there's a lot riding on me?
I mean, there is that element that early investors would say to me, if you're hit by a bus, is it worth investing in a business? And I said, well, think of how many businesses have a name above the door and that name's long gone and the business maintained. So there's an element that, and you do this, Mia, with also your co-founders, but it's what you infuse from what you believe, your DNA, into the fundamental sense of what that brand is and what is that brand's own autonomy. And, if we look at different brands have done that, we look at like Estee Lauder. So Estee Lauder was this doyen. I recently read Leonard Lauder's book on beauty and following around his mother as he was a little boy, as she kind of gave samples. She created the concept of sampling in beauty and trying before you buy. And
because
things.
she talked about how women were the best communicators and the best way to amplify a message. And she coined that phrase, telegram, telephone, telewoman.
Yeah. And I think Charlotte Tilbury was very inspired also by Estee Lauder. So, Estee Lauder passed away, but by then they had Clinique, they had other brands, and the Estee Lauder group of companies is many brands. It's Tom Ford, it's so many brands now. We'd lose count of how many brands it is. I think with somebody like Charlotte Tilbury, she was a very well-known makeup artist and she started, but she brought in her nieces, Sophia and her other niece, to kind of diffuse that sense of her responsibility, and you saw less and less of her unless she was getting an OBE or meeting the Queen or something big. So, and also many makeup artists who did makeup. So I think us as a brand, we're about me as a person to break through the noise because it helps break through the noise. But as a brand, we have a very different mission from other brands. And I think that accounts for a lot of what we stand for. So, many brands, it might be Chanel is about have a bit of Paris, French red lip, black and white, buy into us. Tilbury is be a movie star, be like a movie star. Glossier is pretend you don't wear makeup, So they all have a thing, and we are, how can we make you feel better? So our whole premise is different. So the more we have on social media on Trinny London, there are, across the channels, 1 million followers, and those are really just showing endlessly different people, different ages, different skin tones, different attitudes, but still that commonality that we want to make you feel good. And so that's an element of, what, totally different, but this is quite an interesting thing. If any of you think of starting a business, you go through phases in starting a business. So you have that idea inside your head, getting it out on the kitchen table, bootstrapping it, getting investment for it, growing it, building a team. And then through that whole process, learning to be a CEO. I wasn't trained to be a CEO. You weren't trained to be a CEO. No. And learning to be a CEO is a really steep learning curve. And I'm having, at the moment, you have, CEO, C-suite, which is your CMO and your CIO and all the different Cs. Yeah. And then you have teams and team managers, etc. So I thought a few months ago, I want to do CEO training. I want to really understand how can I be a better CEO? And I then started having these sessions with this man who came from this brilliant company in America, and a friend of mine in America who's the smartest friend of mine, who IPO'd a biotech company, a woman. And only 20 women in the world are in her position, which is quite amazing. And she met this man and did this. So I thought, I love how she is that. And she said, it took the stress out of my life and it gave me that balance. So going back to your very original question. So he said to me, think of what you want to do for the women who are there. Like last night we had 200 women at Westfield, and it was that kind of surge of that Trinny tribe. And it was the essence of what do I want to do for these women? I want them to feel good. I want them to feel empowered. I want them to feel in control of their life. I want them to feel
they can open up to anything and I'll support them on that journey and we'll give them supportive tools for that journey. And he said, you need to bring that into how you empower your C-suite team. And it was just such a brilliant analogy, because when you grow with fear, you have more sense of I need to control. And when you grow with confidence, you have that ability to let go and not be in the weeds. And there are days when my team will tell you, I can be really in the weeds. I can be like, why is this launching with this woman looking like this? And why is this color this and not this? I begin like, and then the more I can actually say, okay, 80% is good enough. That's the hardest thing to hear.
Yeah.
It really is, because as a founder, it's only 100% or 120%. And you all know that working here and working whatever state you are at in the company, that, you know, you kind of want to give it 100% and you think you've given 100%. And then somebody says to you, that's only 80% of what we want. And it's not empowering. But equally, you want to inspire somebody to be their best in the responsibility they have. So that's my next journey.
But you mentioned that your early investors. Tell me about that process. I want you to talk about some of those meetings you had to have. People look at you now, they look at your team, they look at how huge you are. But you had to be out there hustling to get, pitching to tables, full of men. How did they treat you? How did they make you feel? And what did you do to win them over ultimately?
Well, as we all know, there's conscious bias and there's unconscious bias. And every man would think it's only conscious bias. But I did go predominantly to male VCs, and I would have a mixture of things.
Because there aren't many female VCs.
There are not many. Funny enough, 20% of VCs are female, but 2% of investment last year was in female founders. So that means also 18% of the women didn't invest in female founder businesses.
Correct.
So it's quite interesting, that little whole full circle. How much do we support each other, you know? But just staying with the men for a while, as a predominantly female audience, I think that you go in there and it's about understanding the language that you use so somebody can hear what you're saying. And I would go in and I'd want to tell you the entire picture, why it's good, who it's good for, how it's going to be this, and then it'll be this, and then in 15 years it will be this. And like, men didn't know where to look. We know men should really only be able to focus on one thing, because then they'll get it. Okay. So I had to change my pitch and I had to give them, we're going to do this. And there is also this. And I won't tell you about that yet, 'cause confuse you. So then they go, okay, I like that. Yeah, and then they go right deep into it. It's like they need to buy 15 pairs of socks and not go shopping all afternoon. Same concept. So I needed to do that.
How did you explain to them though? And what did you learn about when it just, like, tell me about a pitch that just bombed and how you had to adapt.
So two bomb pitches were, I was doing a pitch, and at the time I had like 68,000 followers on Instagram. And I was doing a pitch with somebody from Silicon Valley. And so, you know, we had the Zoom, it was by Zoom, and he's like looking and he goes, literally like third sentence is, how many Instagram followers do you have? And I said 68,000. Like 3 minutes later, the call was finished. So it was like he literally only saw that if I was putting myself up as a person who was known, my sense of who knew me was only by monetizing my Instagram, okay, and taking away 20 years of 40 million views on television. That just was irrelevant, which to an extent it is, but it was just, to him, entirely irrelevant. And then another person, I was sitting there, and it was also a young Silicon Valley, but it was in person. And I was talking away and stuff. And he went, how old are you? And I went, would you ask a man that?
Yeah.
You know, because I was like, I know what you're thinking when you're sitting there as a 28-year-old guy with 50 million to invest. How long will she last?
But also, like, can you even use the internet?
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Do you know how
like,
to? Yeah. So those were two of my really down moments. And then things like somebody saying, love your business, but it's only for millennials because the audience you want won't buy online. And I go, are you that audience? As a 50-year-old man? You know, do you know that I might know that audience better than you? So maybe I lost some meetings because I was a little bit abrupt in like owning my shit and saying sorry, but I didn't care because I wouldn't want that kind of person to invest anyway.
Yeah.
And then my final moment, my breakthrough came when I was at a company called Unilever Ventures, which had two women at the meeting, and the main person was a man. But in some meetings, I've said this before, but in some meetings, I was in one meeting where it's a half moon table and there were 8 men like this. If you know anything about body language, that means they're never going to invest. And there was one woman sitting there like this. And they, you know, I got the call literally 2 days later and they were not going to invest. And then I got a message from Camilla, who was the one woman in the room, saying, can I invest my own money? You know, and I thought,
because she got it.
She got it. So with the Unilever meeting, the women, which was Anna, who's on my board, and Rachel, they were leaning forward and eating the table. And Olivier was just being French and nice and charming. And they invested. And then that helped everything move forward.
And how did you decide how much of the company to give to, and not give away, but, to how much investment to take?
Hardest thing, women give away more of their percentage of their companies earlier than men. And that's because generally in a meeting where you're doing investment, women will be asked about how you control the downside, and men are asked far more questions about how you maximize the upside. Because with a woman, they'll think, make sure you can take care of it, it goes wrong. And they don't give you the opportunity to say, how are you going to blow it up? So that in itself means that when they're coming from that angle, they will say, we need a higher percentage stake investment because we're worried about the risk. And women give up more of their businesses earlier than men because of that.
Is it public knowledge how much of your company you own?
No.
How much of your company do you own?
No, it's not public knowledge. I far exceed any other shareholder. So, the question when you have a company and you grow a business is for how long you want to have control over that business. And I'm at a stage now. So for any company in the last 10 years, I can tell you our revenue, but any company in the last 10 years.
What's your revenue?
Our revenue, we did 52 million last year in that pounds. So I don't know what that is in dollars.
A shit ton.
Okay.
Actually, a little bit less now because of the
a
pound.
little bit less now because of pound shit. But anyway, I'll give you a comparison. To get to that revenue, we raised £7.9 million. To get to that revenue, Glossier had raised 20 million.
Yeah, I was going to say that's not a lot
so
to
in
raise
terms
to
of
get to that revenue.
To get to that revenue. But then the biggest hurdle for companies is that kind of 75 to 100. It's a very, it might seem big numbers, but it's a time that breaks most companies because learning how to scale is the hardest thing.
It's the scale up, isn't it? Because startup culture, I love startup culture
we
because
want
I'm
to
so
live in it all the
scrappy.
time.
You and I are very, we like getting our hands dirty.
Yeah.
Brene Brown talks about being on the dance floor versus being on the balcony and how you can't grow a company from the dance floor, but good leaders are on both. There's some perspective on the balcony and then you're on the dance floor knowing how to do the stuff.
Yeah.
And you and I are very much hands-on in that way. But at what point do you have to say, this company needs more than I can give it?
When you
to go to that next phase.
I think that we have a very small board, and any founder, your board is key because your board will end up either controlling you or deciding the direction of the business more than you. So
is your board the boss of you, essentially?
The board is the boss of you.
Like as the CEO and founder?
I'm the chairman as well. So I'm the boss of the board. And so
I like that very much.
Okay. So there will be a stage if I might go for a quite big round next year because I might want to do a big expansion in the US. So if I do that strategy, I can do one of 3 strategies next year, and I haven't decided what strategy I'll do. But if I did do that strategy, it would mean a US investor will come in and want a board seat. At the moment, I have one investor who has a board seat, and the other investor was small enough that I could say you can have a board advisor seat, which means a board observer, which you can kind of make contribution, but you can't be in the decision-making voting process. And then I have my COO, myself, and my other woman who believed in me at the beginning, very small board. And so that kind of works well.
So how many people on the board?
5.
And you're the chairperson as well as...
And in this, each time you do a round, you have a sort of service agreement as the CEO with your business. So in that, they write the rules of what you can and can't do. So if you behave really badly, they could take the company away from you. If you went over the edge and damaged the reputation of the business,
Travis
you still have to
Kalanick
have
or
that.
Adam Newman from WeWork,
Yeah, exactly. So I am allowed still 2 more board seats. So probably before I do my next round, I'll fill those. So I'll have people, who are on my team. And you can think they'll be on my team, but it's like somebody you marry. They're on your team for a while, and then they might not be. So you have to be really careful how you choose that board.
What kind of things does the board either advise or decide on? I mean, obviously it's not what product are we going to do next.
If we pay anyone over £100,000 a year, we get board approval. If we do share issues that are above and beyond.
So that would be staff that we're talking about,
If we do share issues that are to recruit a very sort of senior level team, we would do board approval. If we are looking at our strategy, it is board suggestions. But at the moment, we have a board that trusts, because of our track record, they trust that where we get to is a good place. And they, don't say, I'm not sure you're making the right decision, because so far it's been okay.
One of the biggest challenges for entrepreneurs is sparkly thing syndrome.
sparkly things in.
which is, I want to do that. I want to do that. I want to do the top with the shoulder pads.
Yeah.
I want to do homewares. I want to do all of these things. How do you manage that yourself? Because I know that my biggest challenge is how things don't go fast enough for me.
Yes, I totally agree.
And also how much, back to that idea of startup culture versus scale-up culture, I love starting things. I'm not really that interested in them once they're up and running and the day-to-day managing of them.
Yeah.
How do you deal with your most challenging tendencies in that way? Like, what do you have to be careful of?
I identify with it a lot because I know what you're saying, Mia. And I think I will, in NPD, I will kind of have a sense of what I think we want to do. Yeah, new product development. I'll have a sense of what we want to do next. And, you know, I'll have a sense of what those formulas should be and then work with a team. And then when we're in the lab and when we're with one of our brilliant women in the lab who finds a new ingredient that's kind of in a smaller lab that hasn't yet done a licensing deal with L'Oreal, so we have a chance to have an exclusive on it, which is sort of where we're at now, of the idea of you have really true innovation in your skincare. Then I'm like, I want to get that exclusive now so we can play with it and can we make it for next year? And they're like, and then we look at that. We always have this situation where we're always we have this planner and it's a 3-year planner and things move around. I mean, they're now on plastic bags because they move back and forth so much. And at some stage we have to lock in, because if we don't lock in, and we now have to lock in everything in warehouse because we now do distribution. We've now localized distribution. So that means that we have to lock in, since we localized to Australia 3 months before.
Is this stuff interesting to you?
Yeah.
Like, it is. I don't mean I'm bored, although maybe I am a little bit. But
I mean, the thing
do you know what I mean? But
it's administrative. But
is
when
every bit of your business interesting to you? Or are there some parts that you're like, oh, that makes me feel alive?
Okay.
And
so definitely new product development, I love. I pick and shit. Marketing, I love because how we talk to our customer.
You are.
Yeah. But there's a huge market. There's 44 people in marketing, all right? It's a very big team in marketing. And that's comprised of, you know, Paris, who heads up the whole community. That's different from customer service. So that's
Is Paris a person or Paris
Paris
the place?
There is Je t'aime Paris.
Hello, Paris.
That's Paris. And
Bonjour.
she,
Salut.
you know, I think you do like 11,000 comments a week that you personally respond to as a team, which is huge. And to scale that is huge, but that's what makes us special to our customer and follower. Then we have our social media manager who does all editorial content for the site, and that's a team as well. Then we have a team that does paid, a team that does life cycle, a team that does PR. What teams am I missing now? A team that does, Chloe is a creative lead on our videography team, which is 10 people now. 12 people now. And then we have a design team, which is about 10 people. So that team, I know most of the people in that team. And just because we hired some people last few weeks and I have to remember who they are.
And how do you manage everybody in the business wanting pieces of you? Because you are such a machine, and obviously the best way to move anything is for you to talk about it, for you to talk about on your socials. Yeah. So I imagine that you have different people in your business coming to you constantly saying...
Who manages that? Louise. Louise is the rock of the business, okay? There's Louise and Molly in my life, in terms of the people who literally, when they put me in the airport, it's like I'm their child, and here's your passport, and here's your money, and here's how much you can spend, and we're taking care of Lila. If I didn't have Louise and Molly in my life, it would all fall down, I think.
But you still only have the same amount of hours in the day as
but
Beyonce.
She will juggle. She will juggle and she'll work out what's the most important. And I might say to her, this is more
of your time.
It's a bit of triage. Yeah, it's a bit of triage. But it also sort of works, kind of. I mean, I do 80% of what people would like to
still a lot.
Do, maybe. Would you say? I don't know. What do we think?
It's true. Like, from all the departments, we go to Louise, we're like, we need to do this meeting. This is the urgency.
Yeah.
When can we get Trinny? She goes, I can give you Trinny this and that, but I'm not sure. What is that about? She won't, and then she puts you in.
Yeah.
She's actually the robot.
Yeah, she is richly.
So sometimes Louise will say,
phenomenal.
nah, you don't get that.
She's like, forget it.
Yeah,
sometimes
it's not happening.
Can I have 5 minutes with Trinny? Like, forget it.
It's not happening.
Yeah, okay.
Tomorrow
Yeah.
maybe while she's having lunch.
Yeah.
Okay, yeah.
But do you lie awake at night wondering about falling under a bus?
No, I don't actually, thank God. Some other people might
Clearly
do that.
You don't have anxiety.
But I don't. I don't do it yet. No, I don't. I do worry if I'm sick.
That's what I mean.
The thing. So
I
when
don't mean an actual bus, but like when my husband came on board as my co-founder, that's literally when it was just me and a laptop in my lounge room.
Yeah.
And he's like, before he was even involved, he's like, what do you think it's going to be? I'm like, well, no, someone's going to buy it. And he's like, there's nothing to buy. It's you and your laptop. And he said to me, I can't come on board as it is at the moment because you are the single point of failure.
Mm-hmm.
And if you fall under a bus, there is literally nothing.
Yeah.
And that was damaging to my ego, but he was completely right. And we've spent the last 12 years since we've been growing the business together trying to extract the Mia out of Mamamia while still having it as a DNA.
Yeah.
And I'm just wondering, I mean, Lila's going to college.
Yeah.
I know you've grabbed the URL Lila London.
Mm-hmm.
Clearly you're not slowing down or stepping aside, but how do you plan for that? Because you've also got to have a life.
I think you've got to think, what life do you want at what time in your life, you know? And so my 20s was an era that I'm so happy I don't have to revisit. It was a roller coaster from hell. My 30s was my first career of finding that passion that I actually loved making over women. And it was my passion. I could actually make my passion my work. That feeling to go from your 20s of imposter syndrome and trying many different jobs and feeling, I don't know what I'm doing here. And then going to something where you feel you fit in your skin for the first time is fantastic. My late 30s was about workaholism and really understanding the balance because I didn't have kids.
What's
Susanna
the difference
had kids.
between that and now?
Now I have a balance in my life. It might not look like it. I'm going to get to that. So then 40s was about learning to be a mother and 50s was about fully being the woman I want to be and feeling that I didn't worry what people think. And therefore, you know, there have definitely been times in building a business where, you know, the times I would have lunch with girlfriends for 3 years was once a year on my birthday. And I literally did not see them because that's what you have to do to build a business. You kind of have to think, you know, there's Lila and there's Charles in my life. And kind of for the next 3 years, there's not much else because I couldn't give the energy I give the business during the day and go out in the evening. I couldn't do that. That's where I have to admit, even though I have tremendous energy, the girls all say I have more energy than them, but they also go out every night. You know, so it's like they have this 24-hour life and I have a life that is a 12-hour work life, but then I really like vegetate and watch television. And then after 3 years, when the team went from, you know, 65 to 200, then I feel now I have had 2 girlfriends' dinners twice in the last month. This is like astounding for me. And I'm getting my life, just a bit of a balance in my life. Yeah.
How?
Picking up the phone and saying, I'm still alive. Will you have lunch with me?
No, but most people would say, well, you know, you've got 200 people now. And
it's
so
about
many more things.
The delegation. It's about the delegation, Mia. It's about that lovely Michael in America, who I'm actually so committed to him. I'm in a new relationship, my CEO counselor, that I'm going to have a session with him actually, I think when I'm in Melbourne in the middle of the night or something. But yeah, Dad is nodding. We fit that in the schedule. Yeah. Because I know how important it is that I can get that balance in my life and actually as a result probably be a better CEO because I'm not so, I'm just like, cool, let's get on with it. And, you know.
After the break, I asked Trinny what she's noticed about Australian women. How are we different? And where did she do her shop-ups while she was in Sydney? How do you manage within your business and just within your day-to-day the Trinniness of you? Because
what do you mean by that,
well,
really?
the parasocial relationship that we have now.
That's a big word.
That
I
everybody,
need you to interpret
parasocial means the way we think we know people that we follow on social media.
Oh, okay.
So everyone's like, when did you last see Trinny? And I'm like, a minute ago. But we haven't seen each other since before COVID. But I feel like we have. I mean, we have talked and stuff and done lives and whatever. But because I look at you every day, but I do know you. Yeah. But most people don't know you, but probably feel the same way as I do.
Yeah.
How do you manage that in the world?
I think it's the biggest blessing because when I go to an event like last night, and I did actually talk to 200 people and have my pitch taken with 200 people, and I wanted to do that. And it is draining to stand on your feet and do that. Yeah. And the whole team gave their all. But because I do that, people come up and chat to me like they know me, and it breaks the ice and you get to know them incredibly quickly. So in 2 minutes, they might tell you their life story in a fraction of it. They feel they can do that. It makes it much easier to then meet many people because they're not nervous to meet you. they're excited, and they are. Yesterday, they were very excited, but they're not nervous because they feel they know me already, because they do, because what you see on Instagram, putting puppy nappies on to do my eyelashes during COVID, or,
that was my
just
favorite.
being a bit mad is me. You can ask the team. I mean, what you see is kind of what you get, isn't it? It's like, it is really warts and all, but yeah. We don't polish much up. I mean, the only thing is we edit because I speak too much.
What part of your job makes you feel the most you? Like, when do you feel your most yourself? When you're doing what?
Interesting. When I am like talking to a lot of women who follow us in that environment, because it's it's like putting on an old coat. It's incredibly comfortable. And also when I'm just in the zone. So if we're doing something, like we're doing a shoot or we're doing something and it's flowing, then, like we have a very tight team here. All right. So everyone.
And people who've worked with you for a really, really long time.
I'm like, actually everyone here.
Chloe, you've been here since the beginning, right?
Yeah.
I mean, not
since
here,
2012 or 13.
Dido, you've been.
Yeah. Yeah.
You were both in the Australia
Paris
trip
and
last time
Dido
around,
came
right?
around the same time, and Chloe was 3 years before that.
Yeah.
4 years before that. And then John is our newest comer.
Yes.
Poor John, you should be lying on the floor, John.
John.
Because he's made over like every single member of Sydney Press in the last 2 days, literally.
I've watched.
One after the other. And John's the newest member, but John I met, and he was one of the makeup artists who came from Salisbury. And so I met him, and we were already at an event in Newcastle, and I decided to call him John Carlo, because I'm very bad with people's names. So it was John Carlo, and it was kind of the joke. And I kind of knew when I met John that he was naughty and difficult and chirpy and like had that on. And when you are going through something like doing 10 days in Australia, and literally I'm trying to find 10 minutes to go shopping in Paddington, although I had my professional shop up on Saturday.
I did say that.
Yeah, but I'm obsessed with this bag company that this lovely man, Damien. No.
Damien will know.
From the Sydney Morning Herald.
Yeah, what
so
did
Damien came with this beautiful bag company. Charlie, what's it called?
What's it called?
Oh, and I want to go there so
Charlie.
badly. It's a men's bag. And
it's a men's bag.
And I'm so obsessed with it. And I'm like desperate to go. But going back to that's so, we can go down that. It's about knowing how well we work together as a team, and we're on the trip together, and we go through everything together. And that's the most enjoyable part of my job, because we're doing everything that embodies what we're trying to do as a business when we travel and meet new people. And I love that.
Australian women, what have you noticed about us in all your times? You've been here a lot of times.
Yeah. I first came when I came with Susanna, and that must have been about 14 years ago, 2007 maybe. And I noticed then still a tremendous amount of Crocs.
Crocs?
And jeggings.
They're coming back.
And jeggings.
Oh, God.
Yeah. And
well, that's not fair. Everyone was wearing them 14 years ago. It wasn't just Australia, was it? It was.
It was a lot in Australia. But I did kind of find that I love the makeover show we did in Australia, actually, because it was like all these different women, and there were some women who really remained in my mind, and had a huge impact. So we had some women who they told us a lot about their lives and things, and it was really impactful. But the one woman that really had the most impact to me was called Camille, and she came from Kenya to Switzerland, and she had been in an arranged marriage, and she was abused by her partner. And she then escaped with her baby to Canberra, where her sister worked as a diplomat in something from the Kenyatic office. And it was a time in Australia when there still, and can be today, was a racism. And I remember we did this 1-to-1, and usually they would undress and we'd just look at your body shape and stuff. And she told me a little bit about her story, and she undressed, and on her back were about 40 lash marks. Okay. And when you see lash marks on a woman of colour, it's like it sends a shiver down your spine. And she said, she had been beaten up by her husband and thrown out in the snow. This woman who came from Kenya, for 5 years. And from the day she married him, she wore black. And then she escaped, and she came to Canberra, and she worked through everything. And I met her in Canberra. There's a tulip garden, or this flower garden in Canberra. And I remember I met her, and she was wearing black. And she was this woman of colour wearing black. But she had an unbelievable, she'd found herself. And it's the best woman to make over when they've done the emotional journey and they want to then show all the emotional journey they've been through in their head. So she said, I want to wear colour again. So then we went on this journey and I found her this orange and pink, one-shouldered, huge, fabulous dress. And she looked incredible. And then we did this in Canberra. We did this catwalk show at a Westfield. There were like 3,000 people in the atrium. And the producer of the show came on. And usually what we would do is before we'd talk about the woman. And they said to me, have to let you know, Trinny, you have great empathy for Camille, but not everyone in the audience might have the empathy you have. And I was like, okay. And he said, so really tell that story well. So they've got the emotion of the story before they see the color of the skin. It was like a really and then I told the story and then we showed her before picture and then she came out and the crowd were incredible and they just all, and you could see literally she was like a female peacock going to a male peacock and she was like that. And afterwards I heard and kept in touch with her and it was, I had moments like that in Australia where you feel such a change in somebody. And in Australia, there are many different types of women. It's like Israel. There's many different types of women because there's different cultures that come and relocate here and find their life here. And I love countries that are like that and not. Scandinavia is very unlike that. The Netherlands is slightly like that, but there's some countries which really have a great immigration and lots have a less of a migration. Yeah.
There aren't many beauty brands that are so mindful of not making their audience feel bad about themselves or their potential customers. You're always very mindful of being a woman in her 50s, talking to other women that age and younger and older. It's a very specific life stage, isn't it? Because it's when often your emphasis has shifted away from caregiving roles. Your kids might be older or you're just in a different phase of your life. But it's a time when society often is making you feel invisible.
Yeah.
And you can feel the loss of that power.
Yeah.
You can feel the lack of relevance.
Yeah.
What's been your insight or your experience of that yourself? And, how important is that in terms of where your brand is positioned?
It is integral to get the message across that every woman has the right to be really, truly visible. And it doesn't matter the age. It doesn't matter the color of her skin. It doesn't matter her body shape. It's I think from day one, we've had, we have this thing of the Trinny tribe on the site, which is called the Lookbook. And there's about 150 women and they go from alabaster to ebony and they go from 18 to 83. And we do definitely focus on a demographic that we feel is slightly ignored or it's been advertised to by an 18-year-old for too many years. And we want that woman to feel incredibly present. And we aren't L'Oreal where we have 3 wonderful Hollywood actresses who emulate the concept. We want there to be many, many women you can look at that could be you and to find yourself there. So I think that is integral to our brand. And we have, many younger people as well who do love the brand because they don't want to be a Hollywood star or they don't want to not wear any makeup, but they want to be themselves, but they maybe want to understand actually what colors do I suit or, there's on TikTok 3 million skincare routines. How actually should I do my skincare? What is the right way? So we just want to, for everyone, demystify, but also definitely take care of that person who is feeling most invisible in the consumer space.
You launched skincare during COVID.
Yeah.
Essentially.
Yeah.
That was not the plan, I imagine.
No.
Although COVID went on for so long, probably became the plan.
Yeah, it was still COVID with you, but I think we come out of COVID when we launched, but we developed everything during COVID, which was really challenging. Yeah.
And how did COVID, COVID I imagine was very good for sales. I know it was, and good for your expansion.
Yeah.
Challenging personally and for the team.
Yeah.
Do you feel like you're through the other side?
I think that we had amazing growth during COVID because women maybe felt they couldn't buy clothes. I think we all got paranoid at the beginning of I don't want a box and what's got on it and stuff, but little things were okay. And also a lot of women were going from wearing a full face of makeup, but they didn't want to go to wear nothing. And they'd heard about the brand and maybe thought, okay, this is when I try it. And 2 weeks after, when none of us knew what to do in terms of should we do advertising or not? Or what's going to happen? Are people dying every day? We can all go back that time, but it was really shocking.
Like, it was one of
and,
the
there
worst
were
places
thousands
in
of
the world.
people every day in Italy dying, and we were hearing these stories, and it was really like, be respectful. What should you be doing? And then we decided off 2 weeks to launch virtual appointments. And 3,000 went in the first day. And we realized there was this sleeping customer. It was somebody who wasn't ready to buy online until she was forced to. And then actually once she could have somebody she could talk to and see, it became an easier journey for her. Because we're going after the most challenging customer to buy online. But I want to make it easy for them to do it. And then, coming out of COVID, what I realized is there is going to be a ceiling of online customers, probably, but there is an endless amount of retail customers. And what are we as a D2C brand doing in retail? Because we don't want to be selling third party. I don't really want to be in a Sephora. I want to own the journey of that brand.
Tell me why not? Because a number of people have asked me to ask you.
Yeah.
Are you going to be in Mecca? Are you going to be in Sephora? What are you going to do?
At the moment, and things might change. I've always felt the vision was that I feel you want to own your URL and not have to bid for it. So that means that if I am Tilbury, I will sell on my own site, and then Mecca will sell me in Australia, and then maybe David Jones will sell me and whatever. So they will all advertise, and they'll advertise above me online. So in that territory.
Because they'll have a bigger budget.
They'll have a bigger budget. Maybe not Tilbury has a huge budget, but they will just have so many ads above them that people could go anywhere to get that product. So with us, you can only go to Trinny London online. So any retail relationship we've started, we've said we won't do online with you, which does then cut out retailers. But then it means that we own a little bit more the experience. And we also bring, like in Fenwick in London, 85% of the customers who shop with us come from our social media following. And 16% of the store's revenue is from our stand, because we bring them people in their store. And
so
post-COVID,
is it that people want to go and touch it, try it for the first time,
try it,
and then they restock online, then they're happy to buy online?
Exactly. And I think that growth, I realize there will always be a woman who wants to touch and feel. So starting here, like we started at Westfield, last night we did what we do in a week in London nearly. And, we've been doing, it's been incredible, because also, I think because the Australian woman has followed a lot and seen it a lot. So she comes in and says, I've done my routine on skincare. Can I have the routine? That's a big ask. It's a big investment. It's a big bit of trust, and that has been incredible for us to see.
Will you stay with the pop-up stores
we'll see.
in Westfield?
We have a 6 month and then it's a rollover. But what it's made me realize is when you're D2C, how can
direct to consumer?
Direct to consumer, right? You sell online mainly, and we're 95% direct to consumer. You can be in a store, but in a shopping centre, what's very interesting is to be in a kiosk. People see you. They'll see us before they see Sephora. Sephora's got a bit quieter since we've been there.
Yeah.
They look at our team
Sephora,
with daggers in their eyes.
Yeah.
And it's like there's this interesting sense that we could be in a shop, in a shopping centre, but being in a kiosk makes people stop in their tracks. It's like when you planned out the layouts to shops, you would have the sort of stopping, little podium in a shop. And that's what our kiosk does. So
it feels more approachable too.
It does, exactly. Yeah. It feels like you go up to it.
Literally, you can walk around it.
Yeah, you can walk around
from
it.
every angle.
So this might be the future of what we do in retail, but we're testing it in Australia.
And the other advantage, of course, is that you don't have to wholesale.
No, we don't. We don't. No.
What are the next categories?
There'll be the next categories. But I've got 5 in my head.
You've
totally.
got 5
I've
categories
got 5
in your head.
Yeah.
And what has been the biggest surprise to you about launching skincare that you just didn't expect?
That it would be 30% of my revenue in 4 months. Yeah.
What did you thought it would be?
I thought it would be 25% within the whole year. Yeah.
Have you launched anything that you wish you hadn't, or that didn't
that's
work
an interesting
out?
question.
Yeah.
I'd say I'm thinking of things that are sold really well and things that I think are amazing and haven't hit the sales that, compared to the other products. And we have an amazing serum called Overnight Clarity, and it uses a new form of retinol. And because we have this other retinol called Overnight Sensation, and our market is predominantly in skincare, sort of 40 to 60, they go Overnight Sensation immediately, But Overnight Clarity is an incredible retinol. Help clear up Chloe's, polycystic ovary spots. She doesn't mind me saying this because you've done this on Skincare Diaries, but, it has in it, as a formulation, an amazing retinol. It has in niacinamide. It really has azelaic acid, everything that really helps. And so I feel it hasn't had enough love, and maybe have we marketed it correctly? And because we are, I'm looking at, okay, this is a really interesting thing. The importance of TikTok. Okay, it's like it's a continual conversation. So I am asked endlessly, will I do more TikTok? But as a marketing team, we're really stretched. We have so many other bits creative we have to create. So to then say to the marketing team, let's do TikTok as well, is like such a burden.
We just had this meeting.
Okay, so this is good. All right, this is great. So let's have the meeting now. Okay, so then I'm there thinking, I keep sort of then secretly saying, hey, what about this for TikTok to a few team members? And then, Shira, my CMA, goes, Trinny, come on, let's just keep the focus. That's the thing I wanted round.
Yeah, I keep saying, just recut the reels. Put
exactly,
them on TikTok.
But you can't just repurpose. That's the thing about TikTok. So we had these, I don't even know how many, like 30, 40,000 followers on TikTok, nothing, okay? And so
nothing for you.
Yeah, nothing for us. So we had these little things that went up, and they had 50,000 hits or whatever they did on TikTok. And then I kept seeing this TikTok reel, which was about this funny voice, and it said, the truth about Zara labels, and a triangle means it's tiny, and a square means it's large, and whatever, true to size. And I just knew that was crap because I know Zara really well. So I happened to be in Zara, and I think it was with Chloe or Molly, and I just said, let's just tell the truth about the Zara label. So I said, the triangle is Zara Woman, the square is Zara Basic, and the round circle is TRF. That's what it means. So, TikTok is wrong. And so I said to Lila, I didn't tell the team, and I said, Lila, I want to put this up. Make it TikTok friendly.
Yeah.
So she, as an 18-year-old, says, Mummy, I don't want to hear your voice straight away. I want to hear the current voice of a TikTok voice. And we'll write down the first few words, and then they can hear your voice. But we'll do that first. Got, I think, 2.5 million hits. So that was really interesting to
TikTok
see that
natives
difference.
get it.
Yeah. So then I meet the fashion editor 2 weeks ago of ID magazine, and he's a very cool guy. And he said to me, why aren't you on TikTok? And I said, I don't know. He said, you've got to be on TikTok because you could own Y2K. So I said, explain to me, first of all, that whole concept. And he said, because your book, which I have in my office, weirdo. But anyway, he's not a weirdo. He's fabulous. He wears the best clothes. He said, I went to the McQueen show last night and they had the Bumster back. I said, what's a Bumster? Because he wrote it actually as an email as Bunster. And so I said, what's Bunster? He said, I meant Bunster. And he rephotoed a picture of me with a bum crack with Susanna looking down in that Wanderer's Wear book going, like that. And then, and then so I said to Shira, I said, I just gently get in the conversation like you might do when you're trying to convince nicely. I'm just hey Shira, I'm just thinking, I just happened to be talking to this guy, and these were actually a different age group who happened to all follow me on Instagram. This is not a vanity matrix here. This is just, it's interesting. He's saying I could kind of do stuff on Y2K because I was the original Y2K with Susanna. And so she said, oh, it's interesting, And I said, he said there's a guy that you can talk to who desperate to work on your content and TikTokize it. And I said, okay, great. She said, well, if they give you the name, we could talk to them. And I said, great. So then 2 days later, there was something in Hello Magazine. It said, Bella Hadid channeling Y2K dress over trousers, taking a leaf out of Trinny Susanna's book. So I sent that to Shira and I went, come on now. This is like a message from God. So anyway, we are talking. My name. Call my name.
You've got to give the people what they want. You were meant to be here a little while ago.
Yes.
And you postponed because the Queen died.
I did.
And you went dark on social for a week.
I did.
Tell me about that. Why did you decide to go dark on social and why did you postpone?
I'm not a Republican.
You're a monarchist?
I'm a monarchist.
Yes.
I'm a monarchist for the Queen. And I'm a monarchist in terms of what she brings to the country in terms of this sort of figurehead, and that she's always been apolitical. It's very rare to come across people who are apolitical, and she's navigated life from a position from a really early age. And, there's many things that have happened. And if you understand that the Crown lies about 70% of what happens, and I have that on better authority than Pete Morgan, I just think that then it's difficult in the age we live in today that our perception of the reality of a history is really navigated by TV shows.
Yes.
And so looking at that Susanna recently, I'll just do a quick anecdote. Susanna recently wrote a book, Ready for Absolutely Nothing, best title. And she sort of told some incredibly funny stories about her time because she was sort of hanging out a lot with the royal family, which she never spoke about for years. And then in this book, she sort of navigates her memoirs. And she has this scene that, it was interesting because when I was reading this scene, I was watching The Crown. And it was about, there was Maggie for the weekend and there was the bad suit and then there was Diana coming that next morning and whatever.
Yeah.
And Susanna was there that weekend.
Stop.
Yeah. So she was kind of in the sort of afternoon tea room and the Queen and Maggie Thatcher actually grappled over the teapot.
Stop.
And there's this real power play over who would pour tea. And she caught it so unbelievably well of the Queen, like, this is my house, but Thatcher like, I run a cabinet and, her famous thing of I'd never have a woman in my cabinet. She was the most anti-female of females that we've ever had in some respects, you know. And so I think I just have a respect for the Queen. And I once met the Queen and she was very sweet. I met the Queen when I was about 21 and a friend of mine was one of the pages. She had godchildren who were pages at various stages of things she does. And he was a page at one stage and he was in the army. And there was a little sort of tea in the back of the barracks and we all were going to meet her and I was standing and I always used to faint in those days because I had very low blood sugar. So we're all waiting for her and I faint just as she's like coming up. And
it's
then
a good way to pull focus.
I was already doing it then, wasn't I? So I'm lying down, I wake up and she's there literally saying to her lady in waiting, the smelling salts.
Stop.
Which she actually still in those days, which was the 80s, had in her handbag. And the Queen put smelling salts under my nose.
No.
Yeah, literally. It was just
So in
magical.
that week when you went dark, I mean, that's got to have, obviously you did it out of respect, I would assume.
Yeah, totally.
That's got to have a business effect.
Some things you got to never worry about stuff like that, because I think that if you always are thinking, how will that affect things? There's definitely... I remember because I'm a part of a group of female entrepreneurs and we're called the Kick-Ass Entrepreneurs. I put the name on WhatsApp. It was very forward of me because I hardly even know how to do a WhatsApp group, okay? But I did this group and it has really interesting people in it. It has Stephanie Fair who used to run the Outnet and she learned everything from Natalie Massenet. It has in it Whitney who started Flowerbox, which is a kind of online brand. It's a woman who used to be a quite high up in Glossier and just all these different women, a woman who owns B&M, the clothing company. And so we all actually then on things like that, which are kind of how should we act moments where there is no written rules. And so we then sort of said, are you going to turn off all the advertising? So we decided to turn off the advertising worldwide. And then after a couple of days, we thought, well, let's turn on rest of the world because some people just don't care about the Queen. So we actually turned advertising back on in Australia. Well, I think we waited a few times.
Were complicated.
Yeah, it is complicated because there's definitely two views here. Some people do not give a shit and some people, the Queen, it means something. And when the Queen goes, it means nothing. And other people feel they like a royal family. So there's sort of three opinions, I think, that go around.
Thank you to the wonderful Trinny Woodall for giving up her time to speak at the Mamamia offices and to the guests we had in to see her. So many fangirls, a lot of people brought their mums. And as she mentioned in that episode, you can only buy Trinny London products on their website and we will link in the show notes if you want to try them out. If you are a Mamamia subscriber and you want to watch that conversation in all its gloriousness instead of just listening to it, she has a very engaging way of talking. It was really interesting to watch how I would ask her the questions, but she knew very much to play to the audience. So it felt like quite an intimate experience for the whole audience to watch and really, really direct. She's quite an extraordinary performer as well as entrepreneur. There is a link, as I said, to that video in our show notes. We would love it if you became a Mamamia subscriber if you're not already, and support us in everything that we do to create content for women. The producer of No Filter is Emmeline Peterson and the executive producer is Eliza Ratliff, with sound production by Madeline Joannou. I'm Mia Friedman and thank you for having me in your ears.